My name is Rachel Myers. I'm 20 years old, and I used to think that if I worked hard, stayed quiet, and didn't cause trouble, eventually I'd be noticed. Maybe not celebrated, but at least seen. Turns out I was wrong. While I was skipping meals in New York, working 2 jobs just to afford ramen and use textbooks, my parents were wiring my college fund, my money to cover my brother's poker debts in Las Vegas. They told me Grandma had money problems, that she couldn't send what she promised, that I was being selfish for asking. Meanwhile, Brandon, their golden child, the one who always just needed another chance, was blowing through thousands of dollars at casinos, rehab clinics, and therapists. And I was wiping tables for $10 an hour, sleeping in hoodies because I couldn't afford heating during a New York winter. And still, I stayed quiet. I made it work. I stretched every dollar like my life depended on it because it did. I didn't know the truth until I went home for Grandma's 80th birthday. One innocent question from a cousin, "Aren't you the one getting $2,000 a month from Grandma?" changed everything. My fork hit the plate. My world shattered. And in the silence that followed, my parents' secret came tumbling out, piece by piece. The lies, the theft, the betrayal. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't explode. I did something worse. I stayed calm. I listened. I remembered. And when Grandma asked me what I wanted to do next, I said just one thing: don't change the will. So no, I didn't take revenge. I didn't ruin their lives. I simply refused to save them again. This isn't a story about payback. It's a story about finally choosing yourself, even if it means letting people drown in the consequences they created. And if you've ever been the forgotten one in your own family, you're going to want to hear this. My name is Rachel Myers, and I grew up in the dry, scorching heat of Phoenix, Arizona, in a 2-story beige house that always looked nicer from the outside than it felt on the inside. To the neighbors, we were a respectable middle-class family. My dad worked in insurance, my mom taught 3rd grade, and my older brother Brandon was the star student everyone praised. I was the afterthought, always the quiet one, the one who made her own lunch, did her homework without being asked, and never raised her voice even when it cracked from holding too much inside. Brandon was 3 years older than me, and from the time we were kids, it was clear he was their favorite. He had charm, natural intelligence, and that effortless confidence that makes teachers swoon and parents brag. When he got a perfect score on the SATs, they threw a backyard party. When I got into NYU with a partial scholarship, they barely looked up from their phones. It wasn't just the big things, like how Brandon got a brand new Mustang on his 18th birthday while I got a used bicycle that still had the clearance tag dangling from the handlebars. It was the little things. He got the last piece of cake. He got out of doing chores. He was just stressed when he snapped at Mom. I was overreacting when I cried after being ignored for the 5th family dinner in a row. The only person who made me feel like I mattered was Grandma Evelyn, my dad's mother. She sent handwritten cards for every birthday, always with a crisp $20 bill tucked inside. She remembered the name of my favorite book, asked about my classes, and once drove across town just to bring me chicken soup when I had the flu and my parents said they were too busy. When I got accepted to NYU, Grandma promised she'd help cover whatever my scholarship didn't. "You've worked hard, Rachel," she told me. "You deserve a chance to focus on your future, not stress about money." Her words were the wind beneath my wings. I packed my bags with equal parts excitement and fear, and flew to New York City, a place I'd only ever seen in movies. But then, the money never came. At first, I thought maybe there was a delay. Maybe Grandma got confused about the bank account. But weeks turned into months, and I was scraping by on instant noodles and side jobs, sleeping 5 hours a night while juggling classes and clients. When I finally asked my mom about the money, she snapped. "Grandma's going through some things. Don't be so selfish." That sentence stuck with me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. Selfish? For asking about something I was promised? I let it go, because I didn't have time to fight. I was too busy surviving. That's who I was, Back then, the girl who swallowed everything, who kept showing up no matter how many times she was overlooked. The girl who learned that silence was safer than speaking up. The girl who thought that if she just held on long enough, someone would finally see her. I didn't know then that the person I needed to see me was me. And that journey, the one where I stop trying to be enough for them and start becoming enough for myself, is the story I'm about to tell you. I didn't realize I was the forgotten one until much later. Back then, it just felt normal. It was normal for Brandon to get the front seat in the car, even if I got there first. Normal for Mom to ask how his day was and forget to ask about mine. Normal for Dad to leave extra money on the counter for Brandon's weekend plans, but tell me to be responsible when I asked for $10 for a school field trip. Growing up, Brandon's name was spoken like a magic word, like saying it out loud made people smile automatically. He's gifted, they said. He's just built different. His grades were perfect, his jokes always landed, and even when he messed up, the blame somehow bent and twisted its way toward someone else. Usually me. When he broke the garage window with a baseball, I was scolded for not watching him closely. When he lost his iPad, I was lectured about respecting other people's things, even though I hadn't touched it. And when he skipped school for 2 days straight, my parents blamed stress. When I got a B- in math, they called me lazy. It didn't feel like favoritism at first. It felt like I just wasn't enough. Not smart enough. Not funny enough. Not worth celebrating. On his 16th birthday, my parents threw a party in our backyard, lights strung across the fence, burgers on the grill, all of his friends invited. He unwrapped a brand new PlayStation and a leather jacket that probably cost more than my entire closet. 2 years later, on my birthday, I came downstairs hoping maybe this year they'd remember. Maybe this year there'd be a cake or a card. There was a clearance bag from a discount store on the kitchen table with my name on it. Inside, 2 spiral notebooks and a pack of pens. For school, my mom said, sipping her coffee. You needed supplies anyway. I forced a smile. Thanks. Then I went to my room and cried into my pillow so quietly that no one would hear. Even holidays felt off. On Christmas mornings, Brandon got expensive gadgets and branded shoes. I got socks. Or a cookbook. One year, they forgot to get me anything at all. Dad laughed it off, saying, "Oops, Santa must have run out of wrapping paper." I laughed too. Because what else was I supposed to do? Looking back, I know now that it wasn't about the gifts. It was never about the jacket, or the cake, or the car keys. It was about what those things represented: attention, presence, acknowledgement. I didn't want to be the favorite. I just wanted to feel seen. But the thing about being invisible is, you learn to survive in silence. You learn to be your own cheerleader. You learn to tell yourself, it's okay. One day, things will be different. And for me, that hope lived in my grandma's letters, her careful handwriting, her warm words, her promises. While everyone else forgot me, she remembered. Every time. It's strange how a child will cling to the tiniest kindness when the world around her feels like it's made of closed doors. For me, that kindness kept me going. Until the day I realized kindness isn't supposed to be rare. New York was supposed to be my fresh start. I arrived at NYU with 1 suitcase, a heart full of hope, and a list of expenses I didn't yet understand. I had a partial scholarship that covered tuition barely. But rent, books, food, laundry, transportation, internet, toiletries, those weren't in the brochure. And they certainly weren't covered by dreams alone. Still, I believed in what Grandma told me the night before I left Phoenix. Don't worry about the rest, sweetheart. I'll take care of it. So I waited. I checked my email every day, reloaded my bank app like a reflex. Nothing came. At first, I told myself she must have made a mistake, a typo in the bank transfer, maybe. When I called home, Mom answered with a sigh. Grandma's having some issues right now. Don't pressure her. Be grateful you even got into college. Then she hung up. I felt something slip inside me. But I didn't have time to grieve. I had bills to pay. I found a part-time job cleaning short-term rental apartments on the weekends, then picked up a remote gig entering data for a logistics company late at night. During the day, I went to class. In the evenings, I cleaned. At night, I typed until my eyes stung and my fingers cramped. Sleep became a luxury. Food became a calculation. I mastered the art of pretending I was just not that hungry when I skipped lunch. I learned which coffee shops didn't mind if you sat without ordering. I discovered that chewing gum could trick your body into thinking you'd eaten something. One particularly brutal week, the space heater in our dorm broke, and I didn't have the $60 to buy a new one. I wore 2 sweaters and a scarf to bed, my breath fogging in the dark. That same week, my laptop, the lifeline for both school and work, crashed. I cried. Not quietly, not politely. I just sat on the floor of our shared bathroom and sobbed until I couldn't feel my face. Jess, my roommate, found me there. She didn't ask questions. Just crouched beside me, handed me tissues, and said, "You're not alone, okay?" The next day, she borrowed $700 from her parents and gave it to me for a refurbished laptop. I kept a spreadsheet with every cent logged, determined to pay her back even if it took years. There were nights I went to bed dizzy from hunger. Mornings where I forgot which class I was supposed to be in. There were days when I smiled at professors while wondering if I'd have enough quarters to do laundry that week. And still, I kept showing up. Because what was the alternative? I thought about dropping out. More than once. But every time I got close, I heard Grandma's voice in my head. You deserve a future. So I pushed through. But the truth is, no student should have to choose between a textbook and a meal. No one should have to smile through cracked lips while pretending they're okay. I wasn't okay. I was surviving on borrowed money, borrowed energy, and borrowed hope. And the worst part? I still believed even then that maybe the money would come. Maybe someone would finally see me. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, the breaking point, was still ahead of me. And it would arrive in the most unexpected place, at a birthday party. I hadn't been home in nearly a year when Grandma Evelyn turned 80. Despite everything, the silence, the missing money, the feeling of being brushed aside, I still loved her. I still clung to the memory of her voice on the phone the day I got into NYU. You did it, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. And I'll help you every step of the way. Those words had carried me through too many nights in New York. So, when the invitation came for her birthday party back in Phoenix, I bought a bus ticket I could barely afford and wrapped up a framed photo of the two of us from my high school graduation the last time she visited. I didn't expect anything from the trip. Not forgiveness. Not clarity. Definitely not closure. I just wanted to see her face again and say thank you, even if part of me still ached with confusion. When I arrived, the backyard was already buzzing with voices, cousins, aunts, neighbors I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. The grill was hot, the buffet table overflowing with food I hadn't tasted in months. Roast chicken, pasta salad, fresh fruit, homemade peach pie. My stomach growled embarrassingly as I walked in, but I kept my smile fixed in place. Dad gave me a stiff side hug. Mom offered a tight-lipped smile. No one mentioned school. No one asked how I was doing. Brandon wasn't there. Busy, Dad said, waving it off like it didn't matter. I sat at the end of a long table, trying not to look too eager as I loaded my plate. I was halfway through my first real meal in days when my cousin Emma, all of 9 years old and lacking the adult filter that makes people tiptoe around the truth, piped up from across the table. "Hey Rachel," she said between bites of macaroni, "aren't you the one Grandma sends money to every month? Like $2,000? The fork froze halfway to my mouth. Time stopped. Conversations stalled. My mother's glass clinked against the table. "What?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma looked up, confused by the sudden silence. "Grandma said she sends you money every month so you don't have to work so much." He blinked. Grandma, seated just a few chairs away, turned to face me. Her eyes narrowed not in suspicion, but in sudden realization. "Rachel," she said slowly, "you haven't been receiving that money?" I shook my head. Not a single cent. Not since I left for school. The air around the table grew thick. Heavy. Unbreathable. My father cleared his throat. My mother stared down at her plate as if praying for it to swallow her whole. Grandma's voice dropped into something cold and sharp. Walter. Denise. Would you care to explain? Mom flinched. Mother, this is not the time. It's exactly the time, Grandma snapped. Because if you don't tell me the truth right now, I'm calling the bank. And the police. I sat frozen in my chair, heartbeat pounding in my ears. Around me, the party tried to pretend it hadn't just cracked wide open. Someone poured more lemonade. A child laughed in the distance. But at our table, the world had changed. And it all started with a single, innocent question from a child too young to lie. The dining table never recovered from that question. Even after Grandma led my parents inside, even after the door to her study clicked shut, the atmosphere outside stayed brittle and cold. People went back to eating, or at least pretended to. But no one looked at me directly. A few cast glances my way, sympathetic, awkward, unsure. Cousin Emma, bless her heart, kept eating macaroni like nothing had happened. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My appetite had vanished, replaced with a sharp rising panic that settled in my throat like a stone. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. I stared at the closed door across the hallway, trying to hear something, anything, but the walls held their secrets tight. The silence behind that door was somehow louder than shouting. It meant the conversation wasn't impulsive. It meant there were things to confess. I didn't know whether I wanted to know. When the door finally opened, my parents emerged like ghosts, eyes red, shoulders low, faces pale. They didn't look at anyone, didn't say goodbye, just grabbed their coats and disappeared out the front gate like shadows at dusk. 5 minutes later, Grandma returned. She walked toward me slowly, her expression unreadable, but her eyes, they burned with something I had never seen before. Not sadness, not even anger. Something deeper. Something that had been building for a long, long time. She sat down next to me, placed her hand gently over mine, and said, "Rachel, we need to talk. Tomorrow morning, just us." I nodded. That was all I could do. The next day, over a quiet breakfast in her kitchen, she told me everything. "I never sent the money to you directly," she said, stirring her coffee with a shaking hand. "I gave it to your parents, every month. $2,000. I thought it was easier you were busy. I didn't want to bother you with account transfers, passwords, all that nonsense." I said nothing. My throat was dry. "I also gave them $80,000 for your tuition," she continued, voice steady but low. "They told me you got a full ride, but needed help with housing and supplies. I trusted them. I never checked. I thought I was helping." I felt sick. My hands trembled around the mug I held. My legs had gone numb beneath the kitchen table. "But Rachel," she said, her voice suddenly sharper, "Brandon never went to Berkeley." I blinked. "What?" "He never even enrolled. They told me he had, said he was too busy to visit family because he was buried in coursework. That's why I sent him money too. Another 80 grand, over 2 years. They claimed he was in school, that he was finally doing better." I stared at her. "He wasn't," she said. "He was gambling. Online, offline, borrowing from people he couldn't pay back. Your parents have been covering his debts using my money. And yours." I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. All those nights in New York, freezing, hungry, exhausted, came flooding back. Every shift I picked up, every meal I skipped, every hour of sleep I traded for a little extra cash. They knew. They knew I was struggling. And they let me. "They stole from me," Grandma said, her voice trembling now. "But they robbed you. Of time, of energy, of safety. I won't forgive that. Neither would I. Because it wasn't just money they took. It was trust. And trust, once broken, doesn't get rewired with a check or a hug." I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat still. and let the weight of the truth settle on my shoulders. And in that silence, something inside me hardened not into bitterness, but into resolve. The girl who once thought no one saw her had just been handed a mirror, and in it, I saw someone who deserved so much more than survival. I stayed with Grandma for 3 more days after the party. She didn't ask me to. I didn't ask permission. It just happened. Like the world had tilted ever so slightly, and we both knew I wasn't ready to go back to New York, not yet. Not after everything had been cracked wide open. Each morning, we had coffee in her sunlit kitchen. No rush. No performance. She asked about my classes, about the professors I liked, the ones I didn't. She wanted to know who my best friend was, what music I listened to when I studied. She listened like none of it was small talk, like all of it mattered. It was the first time in years I felt like I wasn't reporting in for judgment or earning love through accomplishments. I was just being, and she welcomed it. On the 3rd morning, she slid a piece of paper across the kitchen table. I thought it might be another bank transfer slip or a list of things she wanted me to pick up from the store. But it wasn't. It was her will, and my name was circled in pen. I rewrote it yesterday, she said casually, as if she were commenting on the weather. You're now my sole heir. I stared at her. What? Grandmano, you can't. I can, she interrupted gently. And I did. She took a sip of her coffee, then looked me square in the eyes. I've given your parents over $250,000 over the last few years. That was their share. They used it. Poorly. And dishonestly. I don't owe them another cent. But I trust you, Rachel. I trust you to do better. I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding, not from excitement, but from something heavier: disbelief, guilt, grief, all tangled together. I don't need your money, I whispered. It's not about need, she replied. It's about trust and consequence. Her voice didn't shake when she said it. She continued, I want you to have choices I didn't, security I didn't, a chance to build, not just survive. If anything ever happens to me, I want to know you'll be okay. Not just alive, but free. I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears welled in my eyes and spilled onto the table. She reached across and took my hand. You've handled more than you ever should have had to, she said. And you did it with grace. You didn't scream. You didn't demand. You simply kept going. That's strength, Rachel. That's character. I tried to speak, but no words came. I could only nod, blinking through tears. And I need to be honest with you, she added, more quietly now. They're not going to take this well. Your parents, when they find out. I swallowed hard. What do I do when they come? She gave a faint smile. You do what I should have done years ago. You protect yourself. That evening, she walked with me to the bus station, pressed an envelope into my hand, and said, emergency money. Don't argue. I didn't. Because I finally understood this wasn't about charity. It was about dignity. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone's burden. I felt like someone's choice. And deep down, I knew something fundamental had shifted. Not just between me and Grandma, but inside me. It happened on a Thursday. I'd just gotten back from class, shoes soaked from the slush that lingered after a late season snow. I was peeling off my jacket when I heard a knock, sharp, fast, impatient. Jess looked up from her laptop, eyebrows raised. You expecting someone? I wasn't. When I opened the door, I froze. There they were, my parents, standing in the narrow hallway of my dorm, looking completely out of place. Mom in a wool coat she'd clearly outgrown, face pale and tight. Dad with grayer hair than I remembered, clutching a manila envelope like it might protect him. Jess stood, awkwardly grabbing her bag. I'll give you guys space, she muttered, already halfway out the door. As soon as it clicked shut, Dad sat down in my desk chair like it belonged to him. Mom perched stiffly on Jess's bed, her hands clasped in her lap like she was preparing for a funeral. We need to talk, Dad said. I crossed my arms, staying by the door. You tracked me down at school. Of course we do. There was a pause. Then Mom leaned forward slightly. Rachel, we'd like you to speak to Grandma. About the will. A beat of silence. No, I said flatly. No, hello, no, how are you? Just straight to what you want from me. Of course. Dad sighed. We're still your parents. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Right. Except when you were funneling away money meant for me, then I was just. What? Collateral damage? Mom's eyes filled with tears instantly. But they looked practiced. Performed. You don't understand, she whispered. Brandon sick. He needs us. And I didn't? My voice cracked before I could stop it. I was eating cold leftovers off customer plates, Mom. I was working 2 jobs, skipping meals, crying myself to sleep when my laptop broke and I couldn't afford to fix it. She looked away. Brandon got help. Brandon got rehab. Brandon got silence whenever he messed up. And me? I got blamed for being hungry. You're exaggerating, she said softly. That was it. Something in me snapped. No, Mom. I'm not. You know what's exaggerated? The lies you told Grandma. The image you painted of Brandon studying so hard at Berkeley. You've been selling a fantasy and financing it with my future. Dad tried a gentler tone. Rachel, please. Just tell her you're doing fine, that you don't need the money. Let's keep things peaceful. Peaceful for who? I asked. You, Brandon? Because let me tell you something, starving for 2 years while your parents lie to your face doesn't exactly feel peaceful. There was a long silence. And then Mom spoke again, this time barely audible. He's your brother. And I'm your daughter. That quiet hung in the air longer than anything else had. They both looked like they wanted to speak, but didn't know how. Finally, I walked to the door, opened it. You made your choice years ago, I said. And now I've made mine. Mom stood up shakily. You're being selfish. I stared at her, stunned. The same word. The same damn word she used the day I asked why Grandma's money never came. Get out, I said, my voice low but steady. I don't want to see either of you again. And, to my own surprise, I meant it. They left. Mom crying. Dad defeated. And when the door clicked shut behind them, it felt like something inside me finally locked into place. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. I wasn't the lost child anymore. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. Something shifted after they left. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It felt more like the moment after a storm passes, when the sky is still gray, but the air finally feels clean. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't walking around waiting for something to break. I wasn't flinching at every email notification, every phone call from home, every whispered, "Are you okay?" from a well-meaning classmate. I could just breathe. With the direct support from Grandma, I dropped my freelance work. I kept the cafe job on weekends, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. There was something soothing about it. Making coffee, wiping counters, exchanging tired jokes with regulars. It reminded me that I was still human, still present in the world, not just a girl trying to outrun her bank balance. My GPA climbed faster than I expected. I could buy textbooks now. Actual, new textbooks, instead of relying on dog-eared library copies. I could eat 3 full meals a day. I could buy shampoo that didn't come from a dollar store. I could replace my shoes that had holes in the soles and still keep a little savings tucked away. One afternoon, after class, my psychology professor stopped me in the hallway. Your last paper, she said, showed a level of insight I haven't seen from an undergrad in years. Have you ever considered applying for our summer research fellowship? He blinked. Me? Before, I would have said no without hesitation. I didn't have time. I couldn't risk taking on something unpaid. But now, I found myself nodding. I'd love to, I said. And I meant it. That night, while I was working on my application in our dorm lounge, Jess came bursting in, waving a neon pink flyer. Spring break trip to Miami. she announced dramatically. "A bunch of us are going. You should come. I'll lift." I laughed, instinctively shaking my head. "Jess, come on. You know I can't." And then I stopped. Because I could. I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck anymore. I had savings. I had options. I had, for the first time, something that looked like freedom. So I looked at her and smiled. "You know what? I'm in." Jess nearly dropped her coffee. "Wait, seriously?" "Seriously." She grinned, grabbing her phone. "Who are you, and what have you done with the girl who said no to everything?" "I guess," I said, closing my laptop slowly, "she's learning how to say yes." Miami was like stepping into a different universe. Warm ocean air, late night dancing, breakfasts that turned into brunches. I bought a new swimsuit without checking the price tag first. I ordered what I actually wanted at restaurants. I didn't ration my joy like it might run out. And for the first time in years, I felt young. Not broken. Not struggling. Just young and alive. The sun was warmer than I remembered. My skin, a little softer. My smile, no longer forced. I still carried everything I'd been through. The hunger, the exhaustion, the betrayal. But it didn't define me anymore. I was finally writing my own story. And this time, it didn't start with sacrifice. It started with choice. It was a Wednesday evening. I was walking back from the library, my backpack heavier than usual, but for once, it didn't feel like a burden. The air was soft, touched with the promise of spring. Tulip buds had started breaking through the soil in the flower beds along the sidewalk. I was humming to myself. I don't even remember what song. Just happy noise. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. It was late, I was tired, and most unknown numbers meant spam or another fake alumni donation call. But something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I said cautiously. There was a pause, then a voice, low, hesitant, and unmistakably familiar. "Rachel, it's me, Brandon." My feet stopped moving. For a moment, all I could hear was my heartbeat and the sound of passing cars. "I'm calling from the rehab center," he continued. They make us do this part, the immense thing." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure I could. "I know what Mom and Dad did," he said. "I know they used your money. Grandma's money. For me." He paused, like waiting to see if I'd hang up. I didn't know at the time," he went on, "that they were lying to you, that you were going through all that." Another pause. He was breathing heavier now, like every word weighed more than the last. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Still, I didn't speak. I sat down on a nearby bench and stared at the sky, letting his words settle. They didn't hit like a bomb. They landed soft, almost uncertain. Like even the apology itself wasn't sure it was welcome. "I'm not asking for anything," Brandon added. "Not forgiveness, not a second chance. I wanted you to know that I get it now. What happened wasn't right, and I'm sorry for my part in it." That line, my part in it, stuck with me. Because for once, someone in my family wasn't shifting blame, wasn't justifying, minimizing, or deflecting. He owned it, and I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't say, "I forgive you," because I didn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I also didn't yell, or cry, or hang up. Instead, I said, "Okay." Not cold, not warm, just honest. "Thank you for saying that." There was a long silence, and then a soft, almost broken, "yeah." We ended the call shortly after. No promises, no plan to talk again. Just a quiet end to a quiet conversation that should have happened years ago. I sat on that bench for a while, watching other students walk by laughing, arguing, rushing to class, or heading to dinner. Normal people, living normal lives. And for the first time, I realized that's what I had now. A normal life. Not one defined by sacrifice. Not one shaped around someone else's addiction, or my parents' silence, or a family narrative that only ever made space for one golden child. Brandon's apology didn't change the past, but it did close a door. And behind that door were the things I'd carried for too long: resentment, confusion, the ache of being forgotten. I wasn't that girl anymore. I was building something new, on solid ground, with truth under my feet. And whatever happened next would be on my terms. It started with a text message. I had just finished a study session at the campus cafe and was about to head back to my dorm when my phone buzzed. It was from Aunt Carol, my mom's older sister. We hadn't spoken much over the years, but she was always polite, always kind in that quiet, distant way relatives sometimes are. The message was short. "Call me when you have a minute. It's about your parents." I stood frozen on the sidewalk, thumb hovering over the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. I didn't owe them anything. Not a call, not a thought, not even curiosity. But something in me needed to know. So I called. Carol picked up on the first ring. "Rachel," she said, her voice soft and serious. "I thought you should hear it from me." "Hear what?" "They sold the house," she said. "The one you grew up in. It's gone." I let the words sit in the air. They didn't sting the way I expected. Just floated there, strange and weightless. "They had to," she continued. "Brandon, he got into trouble again. Big trouble. Some kind of gambling debt with people you really don't want to owe money to." I didn't say anything. I just closed my eyes and took a breath. Carol filled the silence gently. "They used the proceeds to pay it off. Every last cent. They're renting a small apartment now. I think they're finally out of options." Another pause. "I'm not calling to ask you to help," she said quickly. "I just thought you should know. You've earned the right to be informed, even if they never say it themselves." "Thank you," I said. She exhaled. "You okay?" "I think I am." And I was. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug or satisfied. If anything, I felt free. Because the house being gone wasn't just about property, it was symbolic. That house had held so many versions of me: the quiet little girl who kept secrets, the teenager who tried too hard, the college student who waited for a check that never came. That house had seen me ignored, dismissed, manipulated. And now it was gone. Not because of me, but because of them. And I didn't feel responsible anymore. They had made their choices again and again. They'd poured everything into Brandon, even as he sank deeper. They'd lied, stolen, and gaslit with the kind of ease that only comes from practice. And now they were facing the consequences they never believed would come. It wasn't revenge. It was reality. That night, I called Grandma, told her about the call, told her about the house. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Do you want me to help them?" I thought about it. Really thought. And then I said, "Number. That's not our responsibility anymore." "Good," she said gently. Because I wasn't going to. We laughed. A quiet, tired kind of laugh. The kind you share when the storm has finally passed and you're sitting among broken branches, grateful just to still be standing. 3 months went by after that with no calls from my parents. No emails, no updates. And strangely, their absence didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a door, finally closing. 6 months after the last phone call, I stopped checking for messages. Not out of anger, not even because I'd given up, but because, for the first time in my life, I didn't need anything from them. I didn't need an apology that would never come. I didn't need recognition or approval, and I certainly didn't need permission to move on. I used to think boundaries made you selfish, like putting up a wall meant you didn't care, or that you were giving up on people too soon, especially family. We're taught that blood means loyalty, that love means sacrifice, that being the good daughter means staying, no matter how deeply it hurts. But what I've learned is this: boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. And sometimes, closing a door isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of survival. I look back now at that younger version of me, the girl scraping together tips from coffee shop shifts, falling asleep in the library because she couldn't afford to heat her room, eating toast for dinner while wondering why her parents stopped calling. She wasn't weak. She wasn't naive. She was just doing her best with the story she'd been handed. But the difference between then and now is that I finally realized I didn't have to keep playing a role that was written for someone else's benefit. I could rewrite it, line by line. And in my version, the protagonist doesn't starve in silence. She doesn't trade dignity for scraps of affection. She doesn't carry the weight of a family that refused to carry her. She chooses herself. I still love. I still care. I'm not made of stone. But now, my compassion has a backbone. My kindness has conditions. Not because I'm bitter, but because I've learned that endless giving without return, without safety, without truth, isn't love. It's depletion. And love that depletes you isn't love. It's dependence. It's guilt. It's control, dressed up in family photos and polite small talk. So if you're listening to this, if any part of this story feels like yours, I want you to hear me. You are allowed to stop bleeding for people who call it love. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to draw a line and never cross it again. Because healing doesn't always look like reunion. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like silence. And sometimes it looks like you sitting in the sunlight, breathing freely, and realizing you made it out. You didn't burn the bridge. You simply stopped building one they never helped hold up. And that's not cold. That's not selfish. That's what saving yourself looks like. Because at the end of the day, you don't owe your life to the people who broke it. You owe it to the person who kept going. The one who endured. The one who survived. The one who finally chose peace over permission. And maybe, just maybe, that's where real love begins.